Hello my friends, welcome to Lindy's Magpie Reads. This is a place where I talk about books, and I have 6 books that I finished recently that I'm going to tell you about. And before I get to those, I've got a few other bits of news to share with you. Number one thing, I'm so happy, so relieved that my house in Edmonton has been sold. So I will be flying there next week to sign some paperwork, and that lovely house and garden now belongs to somebody else. I'm loving it here in Victoria. Their crocuses are up now. It's a great place to live. I've started a new knitting project. I'm making myself a pair of gloves. Maybe I'll put a little bit of that at the end of this video for those of you who are interested in textiles. What else? The group read of Vikram Seth's A Suitable Boy is underway. I finished part 1. We're going to be discussing it this weekend. There are 19 of us on Voxer in a group, and another half dozen or so in the Litzy app. And so good to be sharing this book with a bunch of other interested readers. And I just heard, finally, well, if it happens, that in 2025, the long overdue second volume to this, A Suitable Girl, is supposed to be published. Scott of Gunpowder Fiction and Plot talked about it on his channel. I will link that down below. And in other Booktube news, there's the Booktube Prize. The field has been announced. Robert, who organizes all of this, has done a video. I will link that below if you're interested. There are 48 books in the nonfiction category and the same number in the fiction category. And as I was watching him go through the list, I realized that it was a good decision on my part not to throw my name into the hat to be one of the judges, because there are very few on the nonfiction list that I'm interested in reading. I've only read one of them so far, but the only science book that caught my interest is one by Susan Casey, Underworld, about the ocean. And I read one of her books a few years ago that was about dolphins, and it was okay, not great, so I'm not keen on reading another book by her. There are a couple of books about art that, yes, I am definitely interested in picking up. And as it happens, this is my next book that I've just started reading, What an Owl Knows by Jennifer Ackerman. This is one of the books that's listed for the Booktube Prize. In the fiction section, I think I would be doing a lot better. I've read 9 of them already, but again, there aren't a whole lot on that list that I think, yes, I really want to read it. So I salute all of you who are judges. This is, it's a leap of faith to say, I'm going to read 6 books, and you don't know what books you're going to get, and but it's all contributing towards this project of what book will be awarded the big prize. And I'm always keen on following the Booktube Prize progress. So bon courage to all of you judges out there. Okay, so on to the books that I finished. Starting with Cook Like Your Ancestors by Mariah-Rose Marie. And they are an author that uses both she, her, and they, them pronouns, so a queer comics writer. And this is a cookbook in comics format. It was recommended to me by Rebecca of Read Becca. I'm going to link her channel down below. Thank you, Becca. I quite enjoyed this. I found it in my library's Hoopla collection, so a tip for any of you who are interested in reading this. The main idea is to encourage people to use their intuition and not to be so concerned about measurements, like how much is there in a tablespoon or a half teaspoon, how much is a pinch, and so on. There are only 20 recipes, and I actually tried 6 of them, so that's a good sign that this is a good cookbook for me. But 3 of the recipes are for deep fried foods. There's no way I'm attempting deep frying, no matter how yummy it might be. And 2 of the desserts were cakes. Each of them took 6 eggs. And, I didn't mention that this is a vegetarian cookbook, but eggs are something that I avoid if possible, so those cakes were out for me. Mariah-Rose Marie describes herself as part black, part white, and part Southeastern Indigenous. And she writes about spending a year working on organic farms. So that's woofing, and I did a year of woofing as well, more than 20 years ago. And so I felt some sort of affinity. And I also loved a story that she shares in there about how she wrecked her cast iron frying pan by heating it on a campfire and it ended up red hot. And she thought it was ruined for good with rust and everything. And her grandmother showed her how to save it and showed all the rest of us how to care for cast iron as well. The recipes that I tried included making beet kvass. It's been years since I made it, so I was really glad to be reminded how delicious it is. It's a kind of a naturally fermented drink made from beets. I made a couple of curries, a Cambodian one that had lemongrass included as part of the spice paste mixture, and it's the first time that I've ever cooked with fresh lemongrass, so that was kind of fun for me, smashing up the lemongrass. And the curry has coconut milk in it, and it reminded me of the curries that I learned to make when I was in Sri Lanka for 4 months as part of the Canada World Youth Exchange. It was really a good curry. The other curry is from South India. It's a Telugu recipe with spinach and split peas. And I have to say, I put neither in. I used choy sum instead of spinach because that was what looked good and nice and fresh at the market. And I have whole red lentils. Didn't have any yellow split peas, so I used the lentils instead. And again, the results were great. I made a soup from Yemen called marak temani. That was also really good, a curried kind of soup. One that did not turn out is a recipe from Iceland called skýrturta, and you use half and half whipped cream and skyr, which is a kind of fresh cheese from Iceland. And in the recipe notes, she says that you can use a thick Greek yogurt instead, and that's what I used. But it's supposed to make a tort, and you're supposed to be able to slice it. I even tried freezing a portion of it to see if, maybe the mistake was in the recipe, saying instead of putting it in the fridge, put it in the freezer. No. She always says who the recipe is supplied by, and in this case, it's 2 Icelandic horses. You can't expect horses to know how to write a recipe, I guess. And just yesterday, I made Vietnamese pho, that special soup with noodles, and it was fantastic. I'm really glad that I learned how to do that. The broth is what really makes it spectacular. I followed the directions, charring an onion over flame and charring a hand of ginger over the gas burner on my stove, and then you put that into your pot to make the broth. Yeah, really, really delicious recipes. It's fun to try new things. Speaking of Vietnamese recipes, this next book is Family Style by Thien Pham, who's a Vietnamese American, and this is a memoir starting out with his family as refugees. He was a small boy in a boat, lived in a refugee camp for a while before his family of 4 was able to go to the States. San Jose is where they ended up. And it's divided up into recipe chapters, the foods that he remembers. Starting with rice and fish, a food memory from when he was 5 and in a boat. Pham is a graphic novelist. You can see his style here, including Vietnamese food that his mom cooked for the family, their hardships, and their success story of becoming American citizens. It's just really, really well done, and I highly recommend Family Style. And I've got another Vietnamese book, Saving Hannah, Chang and the Elephants. It's based on a true story, and it's written by Trang, Nguyen, and Jeet Zdung. Zdung is the artist, Nguyen is the writer, and she did the translation, or perhaps the two of them worked together on the translation from Vietnamese. This is an environmental story about elephants in Vietnam and working at a rescue place. So it's nonfiction with these gorgeous illustrations that detail what happens to elephants who are captured at a young age in the wild and made to work for decades until they're too old, and then they're forced to carry tourists. And I learned in this book that it damages an elephant's spine to carry people on his or her back. And this particular elephant, Hannah, who's the central character in the story, the rescue people paid the mahout, who was using it for giving tourists rides, they paid him for a year or so worth of rides in order that the elephant could recuperate at the sanctuary. And it's such a heartwarming story about how this elephant, who had no idea of how to survive in the wild, slowly learned how to be herself and find her own food and make friends with the other elephants. If you are at all interested in ecology and animals, I highly, highly recommend this, Saving Hannah. It's suitable for middle grade on up to adults. And next up is another nonfiction, The Golden Thread, How Fabric Changed History. It's by Kassia St. Clair. I saw this on Freddie's channel, The Sluggish Reader, and I hadn't realized that Kassia St. Clair had another book out, and it's not new. I think this came out in 2018, something like that. But I have her book that's all about color. I can't, it's something like The Secret Lives of Color or something like that. I'll put the title in the notes field down below. And this is a little bit in a similar style in that it's in really short entries, different aspects of silk, of cotton, of wool, and so on. Just interesting tidbits. And it took me a long time to get through this, but I found lots of interesting passages to flag. But I've been reading this for a month. And it wasn't until I got to the last few chapters that I got really excited. There is a chapter on the fabrics that are used to protect us from extreme temperatures, like on trips to the Antarctic and the North Pole, for example, and trips to the moon, and the space age clothing, and how those were developed. And then in the sportswear, that some of the stuff that I learned in here just blew me away. Like the way that women had to wear really impractical clothing in order to compete in the Olympics. One of the examples given is Charlotte Cooper, who in 1900 won 2 gold medals in tennis at the Olympics in Paris. She had a mixed doubles as well as a single gold medal. And she competed wearing a tight-fitting dress, went down to her ankles, was buttoned up to the neck and right to the wrists. She wore a corset and heeled shoes. Oh, times have changed. Although it wasn't until quite recently that beach volleyball women players were allowed to wear more coverage. It used to be that the maximum size of the side of the bikini was 6 centimeters, maximum size. Nothing to do with the athletic prowess, for sure. Swimsuit technology, wow, that just fascinates me. The use of materials that compress the body so that if you have fatty tissues, it doesn't wobble around, makes you more streamlined when you're competing in swimming. So that's one thing. But also that some of these high-tech swimsuits, when they came out, I'm talking about 2008, 2009, somewhere around there, they cost about $500 each, and you could only wear them for about 3 or maybe 4 swims before they came apart. So it's not a technology that was available to everyone, and they ended up being banned by the international board that governs swimming meets. So all of this about athletic clothing and how much money, billions of dollars are spent on leisure athletic wear in the world. If these are the kinds of things that fascinate you, pick up the golden thread. And last off, I want to mention spider silk. So they have made garments out of spider silk since about the 1800s, I think. But most recently, a bed cover and a shawl and a cape were made from the webs of the golden orb spider in Madagascar. And I went down a fascinating YouTube rabbit hole looking for more details about that. There aren't pictures in this book, but it's pretty easy to look stuff up. I will link some information down below if you're curious about the spider silk. And these last 2 books are both audiobooks, starting with a novel from Italy called Forbidden Notebook. It's written by Alba de Céspedes, who's an Italian-Cuban author. She lived from 1911 to 1997, and this book, Forbidden Notebook, was first published in, I think, 1951 in Italian, in segments in the newspaper. So each chapter has a bit of a hook to make you want to know what's happening next. And it's the diary of an Italian housewife and worker. She has an office job in the early 1950s in Rome. And it's called Forbidden Notebook because she bought it on a whim when she was buying cigarettes for her husband one Sunday, and the tobacconist was not allowed to sell stationery items because it would compete with stationery stores that weren't allowed to open on Sundays. And she convinced him that she could buy this notebook, and keeps it a secret from her family and records her thoughts in there. So it's about marital relationships and intergenerational relationships at this kind of pivotal moment after the Second World War. Their two nearly grown children still live at home and are about to, head off into their own lives, and the similarities and the differences between the social environment for the parents and the offspring are really brought to the fore. If you like Elena Ferrante's writing, I'm sure that you will enjoy this. Apparently Elena Ferrante and many other Italian writers were influenced by Alba de Céspedes, and in fact the translation that I read is by Ann Goldstein, who also translated Ferrante's work. The audiobook is read by Cassandra Campbell, and she says the word mamma in the most Italian accent possible. Anyway, I heard about this book from Eric Carl Anderson. He listed it as one of his best books of 2023 on his channel, so I will link that video down below. Thank you, Eric, for putting this on my radar. I really enjoyed it. And now for the best book of the bunch. I'm saying the best book because I think this is the one that will stick with me the longest. Another audiobook. It's called Not the End of the World: How We Can Be the First Generation to Build a Sustainable Planet. And it's by a young Scottish scientist, researcher, Hannah Ritchie. I heard about this through The Guardian. At the start of January, they had the books of 2024 that they were looking forward to, and it's a good news about the environment and climate change book. I figured, yeah, I think I could use some of that. And here you go. If you Google Hannah Ritchie, she's been doing tons of interviews, and you can find her on social media. So, for example, she does some myth busting. A lot of people think that recycling is the be-all and end-all. If you're an environmentalist, you recycle. And she says, yeah, that's good, but it doesn't actually make all that much difference. And she explains why that is and, goes into the data for it. She also talks about what does make a really big difference. And number one on the list is to eat less meat, especially beef and lamb, and then dairy products. And when people push back and say, yeah, but the vegan replacement meat products take a lot of energy too, she went and looked at the data for that, and she actually couldn't find much, and so she created a data set comparing how much of a carbon footprint there is for these different foods. And another pushback to eating a vegetarian or vegan diet that she mentions is that people say, yeah, but a lot of those foods have to come from far away, so it's way better to eat local, even if it's meat, than to bring in avocados and bananas and cacao and so on. But she has the data to show that transportation is actually quite a small portion of the carbon footprint of foods, and it has a lot more to do with what food is being grown where. So for example, tomatoes grown in a greenhouse in Sweden might be in your own community, but those have a larger carbon footprint than tomatoes that have had to been transported from the south of Spain, where they're in season, to your home in Sweden. So it really depends on the food, and also if it's air freighted, those foods are going to have a bigger carbon footprint. But there aren't too many of foods that fall into that category. Asparagus, green beans, and berries tend to be the ones that are shipped by air freight, and the rest are shipped by sea or by truck overland or both. And even taking into account those carbon emissions, the transport aspect of those foods is actually not very big at all. Other things that she says will make a big difference are to reduce food waste. We already produce enough food to feed everybody on the planet twice over, and it's a matter of fair distribution and eliminating food waste at the farm level, the transport level, and also in the home. To walk, cycle, or take public transit instead of driving as much as possible. If you do need to have a car, electric is better than using fossil fuels. She also has a lot to say about biofuels, what a waste it is to be burning soy instead of eating it. And I think a fifth thing would be to heat your home with a heat pump rather than fossil fuels, and put solar panels on your roof, that sort of thing. That there's so much good news in this book about air quality and infant deaths, and she doesn't downplay the importance of climate change, but overall her message is really encouraging. So we can all use encouragement, right? That is all I've got for you today. Thank you so very much for watching, for sticking with me. If you have anything to say about these books that I've talked about or what you're reading, I'm also curious to know who are the Booktube prize judges this round. So let me know in the comments down below if you happen to be one of the judges. And if you're interested in knitting, stick around for a short little bit about how far I've got on one glove on my current knitting project. I'll see you all soon. Happy reading, everyone, and bye for now.